The CEO didn't just reject Marcus Reed's resume. She tore it in half, right there in the lobby of Cross Motion Engines, while his 9-year-old son stood beside him, holding a cracked lunch thermos and trying not to look embarrassed. Vivian Cross saw an old denim jacket, grease under his fingernails, and a man who looked like he had lost too many battles. She never noticed the burn mark on his sleeve. She never noticed the way the factory floor went quiet when he looked toward the engine bay. Why would a single dad with no polished title walk into her company like he already knew its heartbeat? And why did an old engineer turn pale when he saw Marcus's name? Before the day was over, Vivian would discover the truth buried inside her own company archives. The first engine that built her empire had Marcus Reed's hands all over it. The smell of hot metal and old machine oil sat heavy in the lobby of Cross Motion Engines, even though the factory floor was 2 locked doors away. Marcus Reed noticed it before anything else. Before the glass walls, before the polished silver logo, before the receptionist with the tight smile and the tablet in her hand. That smell had not changed in 17 years. It still clung to the air like it had been poured into the concrete when the building was new. Beside him, Eli shifted his cracked lunch thermos from one hand to the other. "Dad," he whispered, "are we supposed to be here?" Marcus looked down at his son. Eli's hair was sticking up on one side because he had refused to let Marcus wet it down that morning. There was still a cereal flake on the cuff of his hoodie. "We're supposed to be where we said we'd be," Marcus said. That was usually enough for Eli. Today, it wasn't. Across the lobby, the elevator made its soft chime half a second late. A woman in a charcoal suit stepped out while reading something on her phone. She did not walk fast. She didn't need to. People moved around her before she reached them. Vivian Cross. Marcus recognized her from magazine covers in the grocery checkout line, from interviews on the small television above the counter at Ray's repair bay, from the company website where her smile looked like it had been approved by 3 committees. In person, she looked sharper. The receptionist stood straighter. "Ms. Cross, this is the applicant for floor technician, Marcus Reed." Vivian finally looked up. Her eyes went first to Marcus's jacket. Old denim, one sleeve patched near the wrist where a burn had eaten through the fabric years ago. Then to his hands, clean, mostly, but never clean enough for an office lobby. A thin line of grease stayed under one thumbnail no matter how long he scrubbed. Then she looked at Eli. "You brought a child to an interview," she said. Marcus kept his resume flat between both hands. School had a maintenance closure. "That wasn't my question." "No, ma'am." The receptionist's face tightened. 2 men near the security desk pretended not to listen. One of them failed. Vivian took the resume from Marcus. She skimmed the first page. Her thumb stopped near the employment gap, then near the missing degree, then near a line that read, "Contract Mechanical Support, Prototype Division." Her mouth did not change. "This company is fighting for survival," she said. "I don't have room for nostalgia hires." Marcus said nothing. Eli looked at the floor. Vivian folded the resume once, hard. Then she tore it down the middle. The sound was small. That made it worse. She dropped the pieces into the trash can beside the reception desk. "Apply somewhere that has time to guess what you used to be." Marcus looked at the torn paper, then at his son. "Come on, Eli." They turned toward the doors. Behind them, Eli bent quickly and picked up one fallen strip of paper before Marcus could stop him. On it, beneath a torn line of text, 3 words remained. Prototype Division 2009. That night, the garage behind Marcus Reed's duplex hummed under a tired fluorescent light. The bulb had been buzzing for months. Marcus kept meaning to replace it. He had bought the new one already, left it in its cardboard sleeve on top of the freezer, then forgot about it every time something more urgent broke. Eli sat on an overturned milk crate near the workbench, still wearing his hoodie from school. The cracked lunch thermos rested beside his sneaker. Marcus was bent over a lawnmower engine that belonged to Mrs. Alvarez from 2 houses down. She had offered him $20. He had told her 10. She had left banana bread on the porch instead. Eli held the strip of torn resume in both hands. "You worked there before," he said. Marcus did not look up, for a while. "At that place?" "Yeah." "The lady acted like you were lying." The wrench stopped for half a second. Marcus turned it again. "She didn't know me." "But you knew the building." Marcus wiped his hand on a red shop rag. The rag had been washed so many times it felt thin as paper. On the wall above the bench hung an old caliper, a stained engine diagram, and a small box of spark plugs Marcus never used, but never threw away. Eli stared at all of it like the garage had become a room full of clues. "Were you important there?" Marcus gave a quiet breath through his nose. "I did a job." "That's not what I asked." The boy's voice cracked on the last word, and Marcus finally looked at him. Eli was trying hard to sound older than 9. His chin was lifted, but his eyes were wet. He was angry in the way children get angry when they are scared of being embarrassed again. Marcus reached for his wallet on the bench. From behind his driver's license, he pulled out a small piece of dark metal, no bigger than 2 fingers. One edge was uneven, as if it had snapped from something larger. A number had been etched into it by hand. R17. Eli leaned forward. "What is that?" Marcus rubbed his thumb over the scratched number. The metal was old and cold, even in the warm garage. "Something from a test run." "From cross motion." Marcus nodded once. "Then why didn't you show her?" Outside, a car passed slowly, tires hissing over wet pavement. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and gave up. Marcus closed his fingers around the piece of metal. "Because proving a thing doesn't always fix what happened." Eli blinked. "That doesn't make sense." "I know." "Then say the part that does." Marcus looked at the mower engine, then at the strip of resume in Eli's hand. He could fix a cracked housing, a bad plug, a timing issue he heard before anyone else noticed, but his son's face was harder. His phone buzzed on the bench. "Donna!" Marcus let it ring once before answering. "Did the interview happen?" his ex-wife asked. Marcus watched Eli listening. "It happened," Marcus said. A pause. "And—" Marcus looked at the torn paper. "Didn't take—" Eli stood up so fast the milk crate scraped the floor. "You didn't even tell Mom the truth." Marcus lowered the phone. Eli shoved the strip of resume onto the workbench and walked into the house, leaving the garage door between them open just wide enough for Marcus to hear his bedroom door close. Marcus stayed there with the phone in one hand and the R17 piece in the other. For the first time that day, he looked less like a man who had swallowed an insult. He looked like a father who had let his silence land on the wrong person. By 7 the next morning, Marcus was under the hood of a delivery van behind Ray Castillo's repair bay, listening to a misfire that nobody else had been able to name. Ray's place sat between a tire shop and a closed bakery with a paper shamrock still taped to the window from March. The coffee in the break room tasted burned before it finished brewing. Ray said that meant it was working. Marcus leaned over the engine, turned one screw a 1/4 inch, and tapped the side of the intake with 2 fingers. "Try it now," he said. Ray climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine coughed once, then settled. Ray looked through the windshield. "I hate when you do that." Marcus shut the hood. "You asked." "I asked for help. You performed witchcraft." Marcus wiped his hands with a towel and reached for his jacket. He had promised Eli he would pick him up after school. Though Eli had barely spoken at breakfast, the boy had eaten half a waffle, pushed the rest around, and asked whether grown-ups could be scared and still act like they weren't. Marcus had told him yes. Then he had failed to say more. Ray stepped out of the van holding his phone. His face had changed. "What?" Marcus asked. "You hear about cross motion?" Marcus kept folding the towel. "No. Their new engine line is overheating under load. Bad. Trucks are coming back. Investors are circling. Whole plant's nervous. That's their problem." Ray gave him a look. "You built half the language those engineers still use." Marcus tossed the towel into a bin. "I built what I was paid to build. And then you disappeared." Marcus's eyes moved to him. Ray lowered his voice. "I'm not poking the bruise. I'm saying they need someone who remembers how the first one breathed." Outside, a bus hissed at the corner. A woman in a green coat argued with the parking meter, lost, then kicked the tire of her own car like that might help. Marcus picked up his toolbox. "No." Ray followed him toward the side door. "You didn't even ask what they're offering." "I heard enough yesterday. This isn't about Vivian Cross." Marcus stopped. Ray knew he had reached the part that mattered. If that line shuts down, 200 floor workers go home. Maybe more. People with mortgages, kids, bad knees, lunchboxes with names written on tape. Marcus looked past Ray into the repair bay. A young mechanic was trying to loosen a rusted bolt and pretending not to listen. "Don't put them on me," Marcus said. "I'm not. I'm putting the engine on you. That's the part you understand." Across town, Vivian Cross stood in a glass conference room with a stack of failure reports spread in front of her. Engineers spoke around the table, using careful words that meant they did not know. Thermal drift, material stress, unexpected vibration. Vivian circled one phrase with a black pen: legacy cooling geometry. "Find me anyone who worked on prototype division in 2009, she said. Her chief of operations hesitated. "Those records are incomplete." "Then find the people." Back at the repair bay, Marcus opened the door to leave. Ray called after him. "Softer now. Eli should know his father didn't run because he was small." Marcus kept his hand on the doorframe. For a second, the old burn mark near his sleeve faced the light. Then he said, "Engines don't lie. People do." And he walked out before Ray could answer. Marcus returned to cross motion at 2:15 that afternoon, because Ray had called him 6 times and Eli had not answered his last text. The security guard at the front gate looked at Marcus's old visitor badge, then at Marcus. "This thing's ancient," the guard said. "Still plastic." The guard almost smiled. "Doesn't scan." Marcus waited. Behind the guard booth, a small radio played a baseball recap from last season. The announcer sounded excited about a game everybody already knew was over. The guard turned the badge in his hand, studying the faded cross-motion logo and the scratched corner near Marcus's name. "Prototype," he muttered. Marcus said nothing. A temporary pass printed with a harsh little buzz. The guard handed it over. They said floor support only. That's what I heard. Inside the testing bay, the heat hit Marcus first. Then the sound. A silver engine sat behind reinforced glass, mounted in a test cradle with cables running from it like veins. 4 engineers watched screens. Ray stood near the back wall with his arms folded. Vivian Cross was at the center of the room, speaking to the plant manager while scrolling through a tablet. She did not look pleased to see Marcus. "You're here as temporary support," Vivian said. "You'll observe, answer direct questions, and stay out of restricted calibration decisions." Marcus looked at the engine. Vivian's jaw tightened. "Mr. Reed." He turned to her. "Did you understand what I said?" "Yes." "Good, because we don't have time for pride in this room." That was the first thing she said that Marcus agreed with. The plant manager cleared his throat. "We're running the thermal load test again." Marcus stepped closer to the glass. Vivian noticed, behind the yellow line. He stopped with one boot touching the stripe. The engine started. At first, it sounded clean. Too clean. The kind of smooth that made executives relax and mechanics listen harder. The numbers climbed on the monitor. Temperature, pressure, vibration. One engineer nodded. "Stable through stage 1. Marcus's eyes stayed on the engine mount. Stage 2 began. A faint tapping entered the sound. "Nobody moved." Marcus lowered his chin slightly, as if the room had dropped its voice and he was trying to hear the last word. Vivian glanced at him. "Something to add?" "Not yet." The tapping came again. 3 beats. A pause. 2 beats. Marcus's right hand closed around the edge of his temporary badge. The plastic bent softly between his fingers. Ray saw it. Vivian saw Ray see it. "Stage 3, the lead engineer called." The engine note rose. Marcus stepped over the yellow line. "Mr. Reed," Vivian said. He didn't answer. The tapping sharpened into a dry metal knock. Marcus pointed at the emergency cutoff panel. "Shut it down!" The lead engineer looked at Vivian. Vivian looked at the monitors. "The numbers are still within range." "Your numbers are late." "That is not a technical explanation." "No." The knock came again, louder. Marcus's voice dropped. "Shut it down!" Something in Ray's face changed. He moved first, fast for a man with a bad knee, and slapped the red cutoff. The engine died. For a second, the whole room rang with the silence it left behind. Then, behind the glass, a thin line of coolant began crawling down the test cradle. Vivian stared at it. The lead engineer whispered, "That seal wasn't supposed to fail until stage 5. Marcus looked through the glass at the dead engine. "It didn't fail," he said. "It warned you." By 4 o'clock, the testing bay had filled with people who should have been somewhere else. 2 board members stood on the observation deck behind the glass. 3 senior engineers gathered near the monitors. A quality supervisor came in holding a clipboard she never wrote on. Eli sat on a bench by the far wall because Ray had picked him up from school when Marcus wouldn't leave the plant. Marcus saw his son first. Eli looked away first. That landed harder than Vivian Cross's voice. "We're going to run a controlled diagnostic," Vivian said, clipped and calm. "Mr. Reed believes he heard a failure before our systems tracked it. Since we're all here, he can explain what he heard." Marcus looked at the engine, not at her. "It's not breathing right." One engineer gave a short laugh before he could stop himself. Vivian's eyes moved to him, and the laugh died. "That phrase isn't useful," she said. "It is if you built around airflow. We build with data." Marcus reached for the old caliper on the workbench. It wasn't his, but his hand knew its weight. Then your data's, missing the part between heat and timing. The lead engineer frowned. That doesn't track. Marcus pointed to the cooling rail. You changed the channel width. Vivian answered before the engineer could. We improved it. You widened it. For better thermal distribution. For slower pressure recovery. The room went still in pieces. First Ray, then the lead engineer, then the quality supervisor, who finally looked down at her clipboard as if it might protect her. Vivian stepped closer. That design passed simulation. Marcus looked through the glass. Simulation doesn't hear a knock. Eli's sneaker tapped once against the bench. Vivian heard it. Her face stayed controlled. Let's be clear, she said. Now, loud enough for the observation deck. This company is not going to overturn a certified engineering process because a man with no documented contribution says the engine sounds wrong. Ray's head turned. Marcus's fingers tightened around the caliper. A faint gray line of oil printed across his thumb. Vivian continued. Yesterday, Mr. Reed applied for an entry-level floor position. Today, he's asking trained engineers to question 18 months of development. That's not what I'm asking. Then what are you asking? Marcus looked at the engine again. Run stage 2 with the old cooling map. The lead engineer's face changed. Vivian caught it. What old map? No one answered. On the observation deck, one board member leaned toward the other. Marcus set the caliper down. You still have it. Vivian's voice sharpened. You don't know what we have. I know what you kept. That was the moment she went too far. She turned to security, who had been standing near the bay door pretending to check a tablet. Escort Mr. Reed out of the test area. Ray stepped forward. Vivian. No. Her eyes stayed on Marcus. We are done letting nostalgia interrupt operations. Eli stood up. Marcus saw him, and something in his face pulled tight. Dad, Eli said. The word was small, too small for that room. Marcus did not move. Security approached with one hand raised, polite and firm. Sir. Vivian looked toward the torn temporary badge hanging from Marcus's jacket. And collect that pass. He has no authorization to be near this engine. Marcus unclipped the badge himself. He held it out. Before security took it, a woman's voice came from the side entrance. Don't touch that badge. Everyone turned. An elderly woman in a navy cardigan stood in the doorway, holding a dusty archive box against her hip. Her name tag read, Harlan. Her eyes were fixed on Marcus. Then on Vivian. I was there in 2009, she said, and if you throw him out, you throw out the only man in this building who knows why your first engine survived the night. No one spoke. Mrs. Harlan crossed the testing bay slowly, the archive box pressed against her side. She was small enough that people often forgot to move for her. This time, they moved. Ray took one step back. The quality supervisor lowered her clipboard. One board member came down from the observation deck with his hand on the rail, not hurrying, but not looking away either. Vivian stayed where she was. Martha, this is not the time. Mrs. Harlan set the box on the metal table. It became the time when you ordered security to remove him. Vivian's mouth tightened. That man has no complete record in our system. Mrs. Harlan looked at Marcus. Marcus did not look back. He was watching Eli. The boy stood beside the bench with both hands shoved into his hoodie pocket. His face had gone still, the way children go, still when they are trying to understand whether the adults have been lying or just leaving pieces out. "Mrs." Harlan pulled the tape from the box. The sound came off dry and slow. Inside were folders, old photos, a cracked data disk, and a plastic bag holding a burned strip of denim. Marcus's eyes moved to the bag. Only for a second. Vivian saw it. "Mrs." Harlan opened the first folder. Prototype Division. Winter Test Sequence. 2009. The lead engineer stepped closer. "Mrs." Harlan laid out a photograph. In it, a younger Marcus stood beside a rough engine frame in a test room that looked nothing like the polished bay around them now. His hair was shorter, his face was thinner. One sleeve of his denim jacket was burned near the wrist. Beside him stood Vivian's father, Arthur Cross. Vivian's breath caught before she could hide it. Ray looked down. The board member whispered, "That's Arthur." "Mrs." Harlan placed a second photo beside the first. This one showed the engine with its side panel open. A small metal tag was bolted near the cooling rail. R17. Eli came forward one step. "Dad," he said, but the rest didn't come. Vivian reached for the folder. Her hand stopped above the page before touching it. "Mrs." Harlan read from a yellowed test sheet. Primary mechanical build, Marcus Reed. Contractor classification, cooling recovery modification, Reed field adjustment. Test 17, successful after manual redesign. The lead engineer stared at Marcus. The quality supervisor covered her mouth with 2 fingers. The security guard looked at the temporary badge still in Marcus's hand, then looked away, as if he had been caught holding something that didn't belong to him. Vivian lifted the test sheet. Her eyes moved fast, then slower, then not at all. "This isn't in the digital archive," she said. "No, Mrs." Harlan answered. "Because nobody paid me enough to scan boxes nobody wanted to remember." Ray gave a short breath that almost became a laugh. "It didn't." Vivian looked at Marcus. "Why is your name marked contractor?" Marcus's jaw shifted once. "Because that's what I was. But this says you made the adjustment that saved the engine." Marcus looked through the glass at the failed engine in the cradle. "It says the engine ran." Vivian shook her head slightly, fighting the conclusion while already standing inside it. A contractor doesn't lead a prototype rescue. "That one did, Mrs." Harlan said. The room held that. "Not all at once." The board member understood first. His shoulders dropped. The lead engineer understood next, and his face changed from doubt to something smaller. "Eli was last." He stared at the photo, then at the burn mark on his father's sleeve, then at the little space where the R17 piece would have fit. His eyes filled, but he did not cry. Vivian still held the paper. Her voice came out controlled, though thinner than before. "Incomplete records do not automatically mean current authority." Marcus nodded once. "No," he said. "They don't." That answer made her look worse than if he had argued. "Mrs." Harlan closed the folder halfway. "Maybe not," she said. "But they do mean you tore up the resume of the man who gave this company its first heartbeat." Marcus handed the temporary badge to the security guard. No one stopped him. That was the strange part. 5 minutes earlier, the room had been full of rules. Yellow lines, access levels, titles, approval chains. Now every person in the testing bay seemed to be waiting for Marcus Reed to decide what the rules meant. He didn't. He turned toward the loading dock. "Dad," Eli said. Marcus paused. The boy stood near the archive table, one hand still half raised toward the photograph. He looked younger now than he had that morning in the lobby. Younger and more confused. Marcus wanted to explain. He had wanted to explain in the garage, too. Instead, he said, "Get your coat." Eli didn't move. "Were you important, and you just didn't tell me?" The question reached Marcus before Vivian's voice did. "Mr. Reed," Vivian said. Marcus kept his eyes on Eli. Vivian stepped closer. "We need to talk about the engine." Ray made a quiet sound through his teeth. "Vivian, maybe give him a minute." "We don't have a minute." Her control had returned, but it no longer fit her face the same way. "If that cooling issue is what he says it is, we have trucks in the field that could fail under load." Marcus looked at her then. "You believe me now?" Vivian held the folder against her side. "I believe the evidence requires review." Ray shut his eyes. Marcus gave one small nod. "That's a no." "It's not a no. It's dressed like one." The loading dock door groaned when a worker pushed a cart through it. Cold Detroit air slipped into the bay, carrying the smell of wet concrete, diesel, and dirty snow piled near the curb. Marcus walked through the door. This time Eli followed. Outside, the sky had the flat gray color it got before evening traffic thickened. Trucks idled near the dock. One had a cracked mud flap that slapped softly whenever the engine shook. Vivian came after them. She stopped a few feet away, not close enough to seem desperate. "Mr. Reed, I mishandled the situation." Marcus turned. Eli looked from one adult to the other. Vivian's jaw tightened. She was trying to choose words that could stand in public and not embarrass her later. "But if you know how to stabilize that engine, walking away now puts a lot of people at risk." Marcus looked past her at the factory windows. Inside, workers were pretending not to watch. "You're right," he said. Vivian blinked once. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his truck keys. "That engine can hurt people if you keep running it wrong. Then help us fix it." "I will." Eli's face changed. Marcus looked at him before the hope could grow too fast. "But not while you treat me like a tool you found on the floor." Vivian had no answer ready for that. Marcus opened the passenger door of his old pickup. Eli climbed in, slow and stiff. Before Marcus shut the door, Eli looked up at him. "So you were important." Marcus rested one hand on the truck frame. "No," he said. "I was responsible." Eli frowned like the answer wasn't enough. Marcus knew it wasn't. He shut the door gently, then walked around to the driver's side while Vivian stood in the loading dock wind with the old folder pressed against her coat. For the first time since she had taken over Cross Motion, no one in the building seemed to be waiting for her next order. They were waiting to see what she would do without one. Vivian Cross did not go home. At 8:40 that night, the executive floor was empty, except for the cleaning crew, one assistant answering emails she should have ignored, and Vivian standing alone in a conference room with torn paper spread across the glass table. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and cold takeout someone had left in the trash. Outside the door, the elevator gave its late little ding. Vivian looked up, expecting no one. Marcus Reed stood in the hallway. He wore the same denim jacket, same work boots, same tired face. He had not changed clothes to make himself easier for her to respect. Vivian opened the door. "I didn't think you'd come back tonight," she said. "I said I'd look at the engine." "Yes, you did." He stepped inside but did not sit. On the table between them lay the two halves of his resume, the strip Eli had picked up, and 3 smaller scraps Vivian had pulled from the trash herself. She had arranged them carefully, but the page still had gaps. Marcus looked at it. Vivian followed his eyes. "I found what I could. That doesn't put it back." No. For once, she did not add anything. Marcus walked to the window. Below them, the factory lights burned across the test building. Men and women were still inside because an engine did not care what time it was, and neither did fear when paychecks were tied to production. Vivian folded her hands in front of her. "My father used to talk about the first engine." Marcus stayed quiet. He said, "There was a night. It should have died." He said one man stayed when everyone else had gone home or given up. Her voice stayed measured, but the words came slower than usual. "He never told me the name. He had reasons." Vivian looked at him. "Were they good ones?" Marcus turned from the window. "Ask him." The answer landed harder because Arthur Cross had been dead 12 years. Vivian swallowed once. Then she reached into the folder and pulled out the old photo of Marcus beside her father. "I built this company around protecting what he left. I thought that meant cutting away anything that looked weak." Marcus looked at the picture. "You cut before you looked." Vivian's fingers tightened slightly on the photo. "Yes." The admission was clean. It was also too small. She continued, "I was under pressure. The board, the failures, the recalls." Marcus raised one hand. She stopped. "You're doing it again," he said. Vivian's face changed. A small crack, gone almost as soon as it appeared. He tapped the torn resume with 2 fingers. "Start with this." She looked down. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then, Vivian said, "Quieter. I tore it, because I thought your silence meant there was nothing worth reading." Marcus picked up the strip that said, "Prototype Division 2009. "My silence has cost people," he said. "You're not the only one who has to answer for something." That surprised her. He set the strip back on the table, straightening it with the edge of his thumb. "The old cooling map is still buried in your prototype archive," he said. "If your engineers load it against the current geometry, they'll see the pressure lag." Vivian reached for a pen. Marcus shook his head. "No, you're coming with me. You need to hear it fail before you understand why it lived." Vivian looked through the glass wall toward the dark hallway. For the first time that day, she did not look like a CEO deciding whether a man was useful. She looked like someone trying to learn how much damage her certainty had done. The archive room was the quietest place in Cross Motion. It sat below the main floor, past a gray door that stuck near the bottom and a hallway where the heat worked too hard. Boxes lined the walls in rows that made sense only to Mrs. Harlan. Eli sat at the end of a metal table with his coat still zipped. Marcus stood beside an open archive box. Mrs. Harlan placed a folder in front of him, then stepped back without a word. Ray leaned near the door, one shoulder against the frame, giving the room more privacy than it really had. Eli pointed at the old photograph. "Why didn't you tell people?" Marcus did not answer right away. He reached into his wallet and took out the R-17 piece. Under the fluorescent light, the metal looked darker than it had in the garage. Eli touched it with one finger, then pulled back. "It's cold," he said. "Always is at first." The edge had a small burr that caught on Marcus's thumb. It smelled faintly of old steel and machine oil, even after all these years. Marcus set it on the table. "Test 17, he said. That was the first time the engine made it through the night. Eli looked at the number again. You saved it. Marcus opened another folder. Inside was a stained drawing of the cooling rail. One corner was dark with oil. Across the margin were two sets of handwriting. One was Marcus's. The other was sharper, younger. Pressed so hard the pencil had nearly cut the paper. There was an engineer, Marcus said. Young guy. Brilliant. Scared all the time. He made a mistake on the first cooling design. Ray looked down at the floor. Eli noticed. Was it Mr. Ray? Ray rubbed his mouth. Marcus answered before Ray had to. Yeah. Eli turned to Ray. Ray's eyes were wet, but his voice stayed rough. I was 26 and too proud to ask for help. Marcus tapped the drawing. I caught it late. We rebuilt through the night. When Arthur Cross asked what happened, I told him the contractor adjustment took longer than planned. You took the blame, Eli said. I took the paperwork. That's the same thing. No! Marcus looked at him. Paperwork follows a man longer. Eli stared at the R-17 piece. Did Mr. Ray know? Ray gave a small nod. I knew enough to be ashamed, not enough to be brave. The room held that sentence carefully. Marcus picked up the metal piece, then set it back down, lined with the drawing. I thought I was protecting a good engineer, he said. Maybe I was, but I also made it easy for the truth to disappear. Then I kept letting it disappear because it hurt less than digging it back up. Eli's mouth tightened. You let me think you were nothing there. Marcus looked at his son. The old defense rose in him, habit, pride. The need to keep pain folded small. This time, he let it pass. Yeah, he said. I did. Eli looked away first, but he did not leave. After a while, Marcus closed the folder and reached for the R-17 piece. Eli put his hand over it. Can I hold it a little longer? Marcus nodded. Ray turned toward the shelves, pretending to read box labels. Mrs. Harlan adjusted one folder by less than an inch. Nobody in the room fixed anything. But, for the first time, Marcus had stopped hiding the broken part. The next morning, Marcus stood inside the test room while Cross Motion's new engine waited behind the glass. Vivian had called the board before sunrise. She could have softened the story. She could have said new archival information had surfaced. She could have used words that made the truth sound less sharp. Instead, she sent a corrected technical record with Marcus Reed's name attached to the original prototype build. Then she walked into the test bay without a speech. Ray loaded the old cooling map. The lead engineer watched the screen with both hands flat on the table. Vivian stood beside Marcus, close enough to hear what he heard, but not close enough to pretend they were suddenly friends. The engine started. The smell of hot metal and old machine oil rose into the room again. This time, under it, there was the thinner smell of fresh paint from the new safety rail someone had installed overnight. Marcus listened. Stage 1 passed. Stage 2 climbed. The knock never came. Ray looked at Marcus. Marcus gave one small nod. Only then did the room breathe. Vivian turned toward the board members behind the glass. She had the power to make herself the center of the save. Marcus had the power to let her fall in front of everyone. He could have named every insult. He could have repeated the torn resume, the security order, the way Eli had stood there watching his father be dismissed. He didn't. He looked at Vivian and said, "Fix the records. Fix the engine. Fix how you read people before you need them. Vivian nodded. No polished answer. No defense. I will, she said. Later, in the parking lot, Marcus stopped for gas on the way home. Eli went inside and came back with a candy bar bent in the middle because it had been crushed near the register. You picked the broken one, Marcus said. It was cheaper. Marcus almost smiled. That's not always a good reason. Eli climbed into the pickup and opened his palm. The R17 piece sat there. Marcus had given it to him for the day. Not forever, just long enough. Eli placed it in the coin tray beside a wrinkled gas receipt and 2 pennies stuck together with something sticky. Does this mean you're going back there? Eli asked. Marcus turned the key. The old pickup coughed once, then caught. I don't know yet. Eli looked out at the gray morning, thinking that over. The engine idled rough, uneven, stubborn. But it kept running. Have you ever stayed silent? Because telling the truth would reopen something you had worked hard to bury. Marcus thought silence was protecting everyone. But Eli showed him the cost of leaving people to guess. Sometimes the hardest repair is not in an engine, a company, or an old record. It is in the space between what happened and what we finally admit out loud. If this story reminded you of someone who was overlooked, misjudged, or never properly thanked, share their story in the comments. And if you enjoy emotional stories about family, dignity, and second chances, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more from Drama Tales Official. Some truths arrive late. They can still matter.